is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Live from London, this is The World Today.
Hello, I'm Jamie Owen. Welcome to the programme. Our top stories: fear and panic across Gaza. Israeli troops report large battles against Hamas as Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu rejects calls for a ceasefire. The World Health Organization warns of an imminent public health catastrophe in Gaza amid mass displacement and infrastructure damage. Israel destroys the West Bank home of a Hamas leader as troops continue raids in the area. Our other headlines: back to Earth. China's Shenzhou 16 astronauts touch down after a 5-month space mission. Israel and Hamas have reported large ground battles across Gaza as the World Health Organization warns of an imminent public health catastrophe in the besieged Palestinian enclave. The Palestine Red Crescent Society says Israeli airstrikes near a hospital in Gaza City are causing fear and panic among health workers and civilians sheltering there. Health authorities say more than 8,500 Palestinians have now been killed since the 7th of October, when Hamas fighters attacked and killed 1,400 Israelis. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has rejected calls for a ceasefire.
Just as the United States would not agree to a ceasefire after the bombing of Pearl Harbor or after the terrorist attack of 9/11, Israel will not agree to a cessation of hostilities with Hamas after the horrific attacks of October 7th. Calls for a ceasefire are calls for Israel to surrender to Hamas, to surrender to terrorism, to surrender to barbarism. That will not happen.
We'll take you to Gaza in a moment. First, let's talk to our correspondent, Sarah Coates in Tel Aviv. Sarah, what are the Israeli Defense Forces saying about what's happening in Gaza?
Hi there, Jamie. Well, look, the IDF says fierce fighting is well and truly underway deep inside the Gaza Strip. It says its ground and air units are attacking Hamas positions, destroying a number of these, along with anti-tank guided missile launching areas. It also says it took out one of Hamas's top commanders. This is a commander, apparently, of the Northern Brigade, a man that they say was instrumental in these October 7 attacks. Well, they also say they have killed dozens of other Hamas militants. Now, Jamie, it's not just in Gaza that tensions are really spiking. Also in the West Bank, where the Israeli security forces continue to carry out raids. We do know that since October 7, more than 120 Palestinians have been killed in these raids and clashes with Israeli forces in the West Bank. While a little earlier this morning, the IDF blew up the home near Ramallah of Salah al-Aruri. He is one of the deputy commanders of Hamas who is in exile, believed to be living in southern Lebanon. We do understand that no one was in that home and it hasn't been occupied for around a decade. Now, about an hour before I came on air with you right here in Tel Aviv, there was a massive barrage of rockets. Hamas militants have claimed that it fired those rockets, longer-range rockets, from the Gaza Strip, with one of them literally falling in the sea just behind me. So, look, tensions right around, and also in the north, where Hezbollah militants have been firing into Israeli territory. The IDF says it is returning fire.
Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has been talking about the video that's been released of women hostages held in Gaza.
That's right. Well, look, this is a really distressing video to watch. These three reportedly Israeli women pleading for help, pleading for a ceasefire. But Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, has completely ruled that out, saying this is a time for war, not a time for peace. He's calling the video cruel psychological propaganda. But look, let me tell you, there is so much pressure on the Israeli government, on Benjamin Netanyahu right now. The number of hostages has once again gone up. 240 people are believed to be being held in the Gaza Strip by Hamas, and these families want answers, these families want action, and there have been continued protests right around the country for more than 3 weeks now, with people demanding the government do more to bring these people home.
And what more do we know about the apparent Houthi rebel strike on southern Israel?
Well, look, the Houthis, a spokesperson for the Houthis has come out over the last few minutes to say that it was the third attack against the country, saying that there are more to come. What we can tell you is one of Israel's top-level defence systems, the Arrow missile defence system, was deployed a few hours ago for the first time since 2017 to intercept a ballistic missile, a surface-to-surface missile that came over the Red Sea toward Israel's southernmost city of Eilat. Now, a little earlier this morning, probably around 8 or so local time, drones were also sent over the Red Sea. We do know that a number of those were intercepted by fighter jets. So this is very, very concerning, given there's fighting in the south, fighting in the north, and potentially another front opening up, which is a real cause of concern for Israeli authorities.
Sarah, thank you for that. Sarah Coates in Tel Aviv. Well, China has once again called for a ceasefire in this conflict. The country's permanent representative to the United Nations was speaking at the latest Security Council meeting.
China solemnly calls on Israel as the occupying power to fulfill its obligation under international humanitarian law, lift its full siege on Gaza, immediately rescind its emergency evacuation order, and quickly restore the supply of basic necessities to prevent an even larger humanitarian disaster. China solemnly calls for greater diplomatic efforts to facilitate the release of hostages without delay, and to work on the spaces to open up space for dialogue and return towards a path of a political settlement.
Well, one organization based in the Israeli city of Jaffa is continuing to offer medical help to Palestinians. Physicians for Human Rights Israel was founded in 1988 by Jewish and Palestinian doctors with the aim of providing equal health care, including to people in Gaza and the West Bank. The organization has repeatedly criticized Israeli government policy. Our correspondent Joe Jarshin reports.
As context, Gaza is under a blockade for almost 17 years. So, for example, doctors cannot go to do training anywhere. They cannot get inside the equipment they need sometimes for the operations, even gloves or like needles. We make sure not to be in any interaction with the Hamas group, the militant group, but we are in contact with medical personnel inside Gaza. First of all, we see people who are dedicated to the health of their people in a really inspiring way. And also their abilities as doctors is really tremendous. There's a lot of motivation, a lot of care for their people, and we see that, and they are very thirsty for this connection, right, with the outside world. And also it's important because all our volunteers that go inside Gaza are Palestinian citizens of Israel. This is very important to us to make this connection, to strengthen these connections between Palestinian citizens of Israel, doctors who want to help and be in close ties with their people in Gaza who are disconnected from the world, basically.
Could you please give us an idea about how dire the situation now in Gaza facing your health peers?
They're under tremendous tensions and pressure, and they see their families running away from Israeli bombings on residential areas in Gaza. When we talk to them, so tired and so exhausted, really, of doing all they can for the people. We haven't been able to get our people inside there. We're trying all the time to get our doctors in and a lot of humanitarian equipment in. We're still not getting any approval from the Israeli government to do so. We're still trying. But the fact that we have these long-standing trust relations with the people on the ground, the doctors on the ground, is very important because we get the information of what's happening, and we try to get this information out to the world, to get the international community involved, to see that the humanitarian crisis in Gaza is really unbearable, and something needs to be done in order to stop the fire and get humanitarian aid in as soon as possible, because the system is collapsing.
Well, let's talk to our correspondent Akram Al-Satari, who's in Gaza. Akram, we were hearing from the doctors there. Airstrikes near one hospital where we understand thousands of people are taking shelter. I mean, where else can people go?
Well, as a matter of fact, that is a very good question. Where else can people go in Gaza? People who moved from the north to the south are now being killed in the south. People who moved from the Gaza city to Rafah are being targeted in Rafah. People who moved to Khan Yunis are also being targeted. We have been witnessing a very large bombardment in the last 1 hour or so, at least for 45 minutes, non-stop sirens. In this background area, the ambulances are coming and the hospital is clogged with a large number of people who were injured and killed. At least a house with 6 floors, 18 IDPs family, 18 internally displaced families were coming to that house, gathering in that house in the Nusayrat area, and they ended up being targeted by the Israeli forces. Around tens of people are still under the rubble. There are unconfirmed number of people who are killed, unconfirmed number of people who are injured, and people are struggling now. Civil Defense, Minister of Health, Palestinian Red Crescent Society, and many other volunteers are trying to remove the debris and to save the lives of the people with the very minimum resources that they have. Also, we have some very shocking news coming from Jabalia. At least 20 houses were targeted with 6 missiles. Apparently 2 or 1 tons, 1,000 pound rockets, the missiles that hit the whole area, destroying 20 houses. According to the initial reports coming from the Ministry of Health, the number of people who are confirmed to be dead is 100, and the number is expected to rise to be close to the number of people who were killed in the Baptist hospital. So people have no safe haven, nowhere to go, and even if they moved from one area to another seeking safety and seeking life, they end up being killed and losing their life by the ongoing bombardment that is non-stop for the 24 past days.
And what are you hearing about what's happening on the West Bank? Reports of escalations there.
Well, according to the statements that were made by the National Security Minister Ben Gvir, he was providing all the Israelis and all the settlers in the West Bank with arms, with M16, which is the official arm for the Israeli army. And I think and find that as an open invitation to start and never stop shooting at the Palestinians. Since the 24 past days, around 250 Palestinians were killed, and we have been hearing frequent reports about ongoing incidents in all different parts of the West Bank. A mosque was bombarded in the Jenin area. Settlers were storming areas and villages around Jenin, around Ramallah, and all different parts of the West Bank. So it looks like there is also a heavy war that is taking place in the West Bank, and there is also a very high humanitarian toll resulting from that war, and Palestinians in West Bank, in Gaza and in East Jerusalem are also facing that wrath and facing that ongoing fire, aiming at killing as much as possible from them.
Akram, thank you for that. Our correspondent Akram Al-Satari in Gaza. The Israeli military says it struck Hezbollah targets in Lebanon, including weapons infrastructure. The armed group has been exchanging fire with Israeli forces across the border since Hamas attacked southern Israel on the 7th of October. It's the deadliest border escalation since the two sides fought a major war back in 2006. Japan has announced sanctions on 9 individuals it claims to have links to Hamas. The foreign ministry says the assets of a number of people are to be frozen, along with a company suspected of funding militants in Gaza. Tokyo's sanctions follow similar measures taken by the United States earlier this month. Republicans in the U.S. House of Representatives have put forward plans to send over $14 billion of aid to Israel. This deal would be funded by cutting back on cash allocated to the Internal Revenue Service. It's expected to cause a standoff with Democrats who control the Senate, who are backing a wider support package of over $100 billion to support Ukraine as well as Israel. And the United States has dismissed Russia's attempt to blame Ukraine and the West for an anti-Israeli riot at an airport in the Muslim-majority area of Dagestan on Sunday. A group of pro-Palestinian demonstrators raided Makashala airport in Russia's North Caucasus shortly after a plane arrived from Tel Aviv. The White House has denied any role, saying the riot was a display of hate, bigotry and intimidation. You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, Halloween celebrations around the world. But this year, there might be fewer tricks or treats.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos? And unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
I think it should be more global cooperation.
I would like to hear more the voice of the developing countries.
Globalization has lifted more than 1 billion people out of poverty.
The green transition has to happen. It's a necessity.
Well, China and the United States are important powers in the world.
What unites us is much more than what divides us.
And I believe China is committed to this agenda.
Join me, Juliet Mann, to set the agenda at these times every weekend on CGTN.
Events have consequences. Words create impact.
One more offensive in a long line of battles that's been ongoing for more.
Just got to be careful here with some gunshots. Excuse us, excuse us.
The world today matters for your world tomorrow.
The number of casualties is growing quickly.
Why, this is one of the hardest hit towns in the region.
The world today, every day on CGTN.
Hello, welcome back. A reminder of our top stories. Fear and panic across Gaza. Israeli troops report large battles against Hamas as Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu rejects calls for a ceasefire. The World Health Organization warns of an imminent public health catastrophe in Gaza amid mass displacement and infrastructure damage. And Israel destroys the West Bank home of a Hamas leader as troops continue raids in the area. General Motors and the United Auto Workers Union have struck a tentative deal, potentially ending an unprecedented 6 weeks of coordinated strikes between the three largest American car makers. Our correspondent Dan Williams reports.
After 6 weeks, it would appear this unprecedented strike by the United Auto Workers Union against the so-called Big Three Detroit automakers of Ford, General Motors and Stellantis is coming to an end. It follows a week of agreements that began with a tentative agreement last week between the UAW and Ford. Workers at this Ford factory in Chicago walked off the production line in mid-September. But last Wednesday, the UAW announced it had reached a tentative contract agreement with Ford. On Sunday, the presidents of the Ford unions voted unanimously to endorse that agreement. It will now be taken to all union workers for ratification. The new Ford deal includes more than $8 billion in manufacturing investments and could give workers up to $70,000 in extra pay over the next 4.5 years. Permanent workers could see wages rise by more than 30%. On Saturday, Jeep maker Stellantis also reached a tentative contract agreement with the UAW that mirrors the Ford contract. That contract also saves a factory here in Illinois that Stellantis also planned to close. Following that development, the UAW then upped its strike action against General Motors, with 4,000 workers walking out of a plant in Tennessee, joining some 14,000 workers already at strike at factories in Texas, Michigan and Missouri. But then came the news Monday that a tentative agreement had also been reached with General Motors. This round of strike action was markedly different to previous talks, with the union initiating negotiations with all three automakers at once, breaking from recent talks when UAW leaders would bargain with each automaker individually. US President Joe Biden became the first sitting president to join a picket line when he visited strikers outside a plant in Michigan last month. Last week, Ford announced the strike action had cost the company $1.3 billion. It is still possible that members could vote down the tentative deals, leading to a resumption of strike action.
The wrong people in the wrong jobs. That's the view of a former top advisor to Boris Johnson's UK government during the pandemic. Dominic Cummings has been testifying as an inquiry into COVID-19. He described government decision-making as a dumpster fire, but was questioned over his own role, including messages he'd sent containing extreme language. More than 230,000 people died from the virus in Britain, a higher per capita rate than most European countries. Climate change is affecting the balance of ecosystems all around the world. The United States has seen an increase in waterborne algae, which is known to be toxic. Scientists are trying to find new ways of trying to stop its spread. Our correspondent Adis Tianshan reports.
Doubling their numbers in a matter of hours, blue-green algae are a type of toxic bacteria that can grow exponentially in water systems. And in recent years, they've become a lot more common.
Cyanobacteria, also known as blue-green algae blooms, have really taken over in recent years because with global warming and climate change in general, you see it's more prevalent not only here in the United States, but in water bodies all over the world.
The formation of toxic blooms is unpredictable, but warmer temperatures have made them worse.
We see it every few years. In fact, we had a pretty intense bloom last summer. But this year is way worse than we've ever seen in the 35 years I've been practicing marine mammal medicine.
And its damage on marine life earlier this summer took all by surprise, with scores of sick and dying sea lions and dolphins washed up on the shores of Southern California.
There's no cure. We can give them anti-seizure medications, we can give them steroids, and we can get them to eat lots of untainted fish and just hope that they can work it out through their systems. There is no cure for this disease.
Several human communities have also been exposed to algae blooms in their freshwater systems, amid worries their neurotoxins could have significant health impacts in the long term. But new technologies have become available to stop their spread.
Lakeguard Oxy is a hydrogen peroxide-based algicide, and once it's in water, it disintegrates into hydrogen and water molecules. But what it does is it initiates a stress within the cyanobacteria colony, causing it to collapse on itself. So it's an environmentally safe algicide that doesn't harm fish or any other types of water inhabitants, and it targets the blue-green algae specifically.
Removing algae from a water source is just a temporary solution, as they can easily reappear as a major threat to the environment and human health, exacerbated by climate change. It is Tianshan, CGTN, Los Angeles.
3 Chinese astronauts have landed safely back on Earth after spending nearly 5 months on board the country's space station. The crew of Shenzhou 16 touched down successfully. Our correspondent Sunya reports.
Shenzhou 16 crew has landed back home here at the Dongfeng landing site, and they have spoke their first emotional, heartfelt words on the ground.
I feel very excited at this very moment. Finally, we came back home. This trip took 5 months, but it feels so good that we have successfully completed all the tasks. And I want to address my gratitude to my dear colleagues. I am so happy to come back home. I'm very lucky to get the chance to execute the task in space as flight engineer. I want to express my gratitude for being a member of this generation, which offered me this platform to realize my dream. It feels so good to complete the task successfully. In the past 5 months, we have been supported in every way we could be. With the lead of the commander, we have spent every day in the space station enriched.
The Shenzhou 16 crew had an in-orbit handover on Sunday with the newly arrived Shenzhou 17 crew. The Shenzhou 16 crew had also alternated with the Shenzhou 15 crew when they first arrived at the space station in late May. The Shenzhou 16 mission was the first since China's space station entered long-term operation. The crew's makeup was also the first to include a pilot, a flight engineer, and a payload specialist. While in orbit, Dave conducted a large amount of experiments and a spacewalk. Dave maintained and installed equipment for the space station. They live-streamed a science lesson to students nationwide, as Dave also talked with people from home and abroad, asking them to work together in space exploration for the benefit of all humankind. And after their safe return to Earth, the Shenzhou 16 mission is officially a complete success. 孙烨 CGTN 酒泉。
Halloween is being celebrated in many countries, but for some, the festivities this year are being done on a budget due to the rising cost of living. Our correspondent Jody Jacobs reports now from New York.
It's Halloween, a time for the young and the young at heart to dress up and go on a candy crawl. So ahead of All Hallows Eve, I decided to check out which costumes are trending this year. I'm told pop culture icons like Barbie, Wednesday Addams, and the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles top the list of outfits for this year. Probably not something that I would be comfortable in. Maybe something like this. Or this. Or perhaps this. There's a costume choice here for everyone.
Well, Halloween is always an eagerly anticipated holiday, especially here in the US. The experts say there's some unique factors this year, like the scary buzz phrases of inflation and economic strain.
We are seeing some people that are like that, and obviously we have options for that. But just like everybody else, inflation hit. Like, we try to work with as best as we can. We have a whole range of costumes, from like some like more packaged costumes that are like can start at like anywhere from like 50 to like 89 to $100, and then we have high-end costumes, suits of armor and everything like that. Some of those things can be really super extravagant, like film quality costumes. So we've been seeing both move.
In a recent survey published by the Halloween and Costume Association, 2/3 of Americans seem to be haunted by inflation, with around 36% saying they will be spending less this Halloween compared to last year. 42% of respondents say price is definitely impacting their costume choices. And while there continues to be much excitement around this, the most wonderful time of fear, the Halloween industry is worried they might get ghosted by consumers. Jody Jacobs, CGTN, New York.
The headlines again. Fear and panic across Gaza. Israeli troops report large battles against Hamas as Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu rejects calls for a ceasefire. The World Health Organization warns of an imminent public health catastrophe in Gaza amid mass displacement and infrastructure damage. And Israel destroys the West Bank home of a Hamas leader as troops continue raids in the area. And that is the world today. Thank you for watching. We're back with more news at the top of this hour. Coming up next, it's World Insight. For now, from all of the team in London, it's goodbye.